Well, North America has been grappling with racial tensions. What is the proper way to deal with this ongoing issue? Today's guest is one of two pastors, one white, one black, who each have managed to build racially diverse congregations. Joining me from Memphis, Tennessee is Pastor John Siebeling. He's the senior pastor of the Life Church and co-author of God and Race, a guide for moving beyond black fists and white knuckles. Quite a title there. Welcome to Bridge City News, Pastor John. Great to have you on today.
Jeanette, thank you so much. Really big honor for me to be on the program with you.
Oh, thank you so much. So maybe first of all, tell us a bit about the backstory. What sparked you and your African-American co-author, Pastor Wayne Francis, to write this book?
Well, obviously, if you've been following the news, this is a very relevant subject, has been for many, many years, but it seems like the last few years, especially 2020, things kind of, went to another level in terms of the pain. We saw a lot of protests. We saw a lot of different things happen. Wayne and I have been friends for many years, and we just had it in our heart. Both of us have built diverse congregations, church congregations. We've been in Memphis for 25 years. Which has sort of been a hotbed of racism. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was assassinated here. And we just felt like, hey, why don't we come together? I'm not sure how many books have been written by a black, man and a white man, both coming together. And so we said, let's do this. We did a sermon series in our church first, and it was just so much great response that we started to get, publishers reaching out to us. And it's been amazing to see the response and to be able to, we alternate chapters, so it's written really well. Wayne will write a chapter, then I'll write a chapter, and our story is woven through, and it's been great.
Wow, it's too bad that it even has to be an issue to begin with. But like you said, you're living in quite a hotbed there, Memphis. I mean, all the South just has its contention. All of America, really, when you think about it. Maybe talk to us a little bit about the Black Lives Matter movement. How have relations changed since the movement started, and what can be done to improve the overall situation?
Well, I'm not an expert per se on the movement, but I know in 2020 that phrase became a real important phrase. And I think, we had talked earlier about, the fact that for some white people, they would say something like Black Lives Matter, of course, because all lives matter. But the point is, in 2020, really what we needed to say is Black Lives Matter, period. I'm not an advocate for the organization, but I believe in that statement for sure. Of course, all lives matter, but I think our Black friends and our African American friends need to hear us say that and put a period at the end, just so they know, because I think there have been seasons where they perhaps didn't feel like their lives mattered. And certainly we see, after the brutal killing of George Floyd in May of 2020, we saw a lot of emotional eruption, which, was real. And so I think the whole movement came out of that. I'm not an expert in the organization or the movement per se, but I like the statement because I do believe Black Lives Matter.
Definitely, yeah. So you think they just want to be seen, they just want to be acknowledged.
Right. Absolutely.
And I think there are a lot of opinions on what racism actually is. So how would you define racism in practical terms?
Well, I think racism is when you harbor opinions about someone solely based on the color of their skin, and you have presupposed ideas or thoughts in your mind. I think some of the response we've been getting to God and Race is been amazing. I had a friend who texted me who was driving his child to school, and he said he saw someone drive in the neighborhood and thought in his mind immediately, well, they must be coming to clean somebody's house. And he just got this sense of conviction because he's in the middle of the book, and there's a whole chapter on profiling, and he realized, wow, I've got some progress that needs to be made. And I think for all of us, it may not be your fault that you have racism or sort of racial kind of, discrimination thinking, but you do have a responsibility to change and to look at it in the mirror and let God and let some new thinking come into your heart about people that look different than you. And let me just say one more thing, Jeanette. I think it all starts with relationship. When you sit across the table with someone who looks different than you and you ask them their story, particularly in the South, again, we'll just talk about the Southern United States. If you're a white person sitting across the table with a black person and you're building a relationship with them and you ask them, tell me your story, and you listen with an open heart, you'll be surprised to hear some of the things that you hear about some of the things that they experienced. And so all that begins to, work on your soul and work on your heart, work on your mind.
Yeah, that is such a good point because you don't know what somebody else's reality is. You can have all these preconceived notions and stuff, but until you actually really know that person, you really don't, you shouldn't be saying anything, really. And it's so interesting to me that you being a pastor and then your co-author a pastor, and the name of your book is called God and Race. So why that title, God and Race? How does God view race anyways? I would think that God would be the most unracist of all.
Right. Well, God created all of us. Yes, right. He created us and he created us in his image, and we are all different and we look different. And so, I think a book about race is powerful. A book about God can be powerful, but if you bring the two together, I think that's really where you find the ability to bring our identity back into how we've been created. And if you can get your identity rooted back into your creation, which is God created us, I think the scales begin to fall from your eyes and you begin to see things different. I always like to encourage people. You may not have. Okay, so maybe you were raised in a home where your parents were racist in their with their jokes or words, and so maybe that's not your fault. But now you have a responsibility to again uproot some of those things and see people for how God has created them.
Yeah, I love that. It's a good point. Is it possible that we, both white people and people of color, can hold racist views and attitudes without even realizing it? I think you just kind of mentioned the gentleman that was reading the book maybe didn't realize it before. So if this is the case, how do we recognize this and how can we change this?
Well, one of the things that we talk about is educating yourself and realizing maybe the history of your country, your history of your city, maybe even talking to your family and your parents, and you realize there's maybe some hurt that has happened in the past, and so you educate yourself on your own upbringing. But I think reading books, all right, like God and Race, okay, doing a little education and being willing to open your heart and your mind to new thinking, and you'll be amazed at how and confront is a strong word, but how some new thinking can kind of confront some of that old thinking, some of those old mindsets. And so our goal, Wayne and I's goal in writing the book, is that people would see our relationship modeled. And we also have a companion guide. It's a study guide. It's a 5-part video series that churches can use, small groups can use. And in those videos, Wayne and I are talking together. And so our goal, our hope is that we're modeling some form of open-handed and open-hearted dialogue that can motivate people to begin building their own relationships and hearing someone else's story. And you can't deny someone else's experience. You can't deny someone's story. It is their truth. It's what they've experienced. And if you keep your heart open, it can really impact you.
Oh, yeah. No, that's wonderful. Now, do you find that racial groups tend to live and congregate in the same areas as opposed to intermingling? I would imagine maybe more so where you live.
I think it's easier to, we're more comfortable with people who are like us. So we tend to migrate, and churches do this, and neighborhoods do this, and we as individuals, we're looking for people who look like us. And so sometimes that's why we have to push ourselves out of our own comfort zone, and kind of step across the street and talk to somebody different than us, meet somebody, start spending time with somebody different than us. Push yourself out of your comfort zone in a way.
Do you think it's fear based?
I do. I mean, I think the fear of the unknown, fear of we talk about, kind of the fear of it's a perfection problem, or particularly when you're trying to build a relationship with somebody that looks different than you, from a racial standpoint, from an ethnicity standpoint. Sometimes we're afraid of saying the wrong thing. We're afraid we won't relate. We won't have anything that in common, and we won't have anything to relate with each other about. But nothing good happens in fear. Step out of the fear that you have, and do something new. Take some risks. Start building some new relationships, and it'll change your life.
Interesting. That's awesome. Do you have any thoughts on critical race theory that's being taught in the public schools? Some people, I guess, believe that it's necessary to decrease racism, right? While others might believe that it's actually causing more division than unity. What are your thoughts?
Personally, as a Christian, it doesn't line up for me with my conviction and my commitment to the Bible. I think as a Christian and as a believer, my identity as a Christian is first. And so I think sometimes with critical race theory, really critical theory in general, is it sort of causes us to lift other identities up above our identity as a Christian. So I'm not a white person first. I'm a Christian first. My whiteness is below that. And so that is my particular opinion. Maybe there's some, pieces of critical theory or critical race theory that are valid and valuable. And I've certainly heard people talk about that. But I think it can tend to create a shame where white people are concerned, and it can tend to create a victimhood where African Americans are concerned. Again, just my opinion. I'm not an expert on this theory, but I believe as a Christian, that's my number one identity.
Okay, so you mentioned Christians. So, how can Christians then start meaningful conversations about race? Is this something that we should be doing? And are there certain approaches to this that we should avoid? That's one thing you mentioned before, that you might not know how to approach the subject in order to, you want to avoid maybe unnecessary arguments.
So Wayne and I in the book kind of lay out what we call these ground rules, and they're very simple ground rules for having discussions with people that are different than you. And you got to listen. I think you have to listen with an open heart. You have to look, and that means you're looking into whatever the other person is saying. You're looking them in the eye, right? I mean, one of the challenges we've had with COVID-19 is the isolation piece. So we've not been able to be together with people. So it's much easier to communicate via social media, which is not always helpful. So you look, and then number three, you learn. Let's learn, let's grow, let's educate ourselves. Let's read God and Race, a guide for moving beyond black fists, white knuckles. And then number four, we should laugh. And it's one of the things I appreciate about Wayne. And I think you should look for relationships where people can help you be yourself. And so I don't need to be perfect when I'm with Wayne. I don't have to have all the answers when I'm discussing things with him. And so I think we got to give each other some grace to laugh a little bit. We're going to make mistakes, but I think that's all part of building relationships.
So, where do you see racial reconciliation going over the next decade? What needs to happen?
That's a very difficult question. We wrote the book, and we're in this process. I like to say we're in it for the long game, and so we're hoping for 1,000 churches to use our video curriculum, the God and Race video curriculum, to begin small groups in their churches and in their communities, where people of different ethnicities can get together and have good discussion, and I think that can create a movement. So I hope we're making progress. We're moving toward greater reconciliation. I think it's the goal. And again, we don't suppose that one book is going to change everything, but we're doing our part. And I think Christians, we all should be doing our part, and everybody really, to try to bring harmony into our communities and into our cities. And I think by God's grace, we can do it.
Thanks so much for being with us today, Pastor John. We appreciate having you on.
Thank you, Jeanette. It was a real honor for me to be with you.
Thank you. Such an important subject, too. John Siebeling is the co-author of God and Race, available at Amazon.ca. I'm Jeanette Roche on behalf of all of us here at Bridge City News. Thanks for watching.